The Flash movie is a film built on toxicity. But before we get into that, let's do some housekeeping and give you some information that you may not have heard from our beloved friend Kevin Smith, who seems to be throwing WB and DC under the bus. This is very interesting. Although Kevin said he loved the cameos and all of that, it's interesting. Kevin Smith will do his shilling for the studio, but then all of a sudden he'll start saying stuff like they offered the George Clooney Batman role to Christian Bale. He said no. Smart man. Why would Christian Bale come back as Batman for a few seconds and as a bad joke? He'd already had his reputation tarnished in Thor: Love and Thunder. But Kevin didn't stop there, because he revealed he was under the impression that Grant Gustin was going to cameo in the Flash movie. Of course, Grant Gustin should have cameoed in the Flash movie. Grant Gustin is the reason that mainstream audiences, the general audience, even know who the Flash is. And they wouldn't even allow him to cameo. Did Grant actually shoot a cameo? We will never know. So that's just even more evidence and proof exposing WB that this film, the Flash movie, was built on toxicity. Of course, after the second weekend box office reports, all the people who have been shilling this film are coming on Twitter giving you contrived reasons why this movie failed. Every one of those reasons are wrong. They know exactly why the Flash movie failed. It's karma. Pure karma. Let's look at Mr. James Gunn first of all. Who employed James Gunn? No, not who employed him to be co-CEO of DC Studios. Who brought him in to write and direct the Suicide Squad movie? Toby Emmerich, Ann Sarnoff, and Walter Hamada. Walter Hamada, the man who asked Ray Fisher to lie and say that all the problems were Joss Whedon in Justice League and the reshoots, and to throw Joss under the bus and to protect Jeff Johns. To his credit, Ray Fisher said no and exposed Hamada. So once Fisher exposed Hamada, his position was untenable. They needed to bring in somebody else, somebody new. But this time, somebody the audience trusted, Mr. James Gunn. Luckily for WB, James Gunn had been exposed by alt-right groups for posting jokes about children getting abused. He was fired temporarily from Disney, so Emmerich and Hamada and Sarnoff saw an opportunity. Come here, James, make any DC movie you want. So he was asked to do a Superman movie. Now, the biggest of ironies, he was bragging how he didn't want to make a Superman movie, and there was only ever one movie he wanted to make about DC characters, the Suicide Squad characters. So, facts that James Gunn never wanted to make a Superman movie. As we already know, he's admitted he really didn't want to direct Superman Legacy. He wrote the movie, but he didn't necessarily want to commit 2 years of his life on this movie, because James Gunn doesn't have an affiliation with Superman. Now, don't get me wrong, you don't have to love an iconic character to make a great movie about him, but it does help, because Richard Donner adored Superman and wanted to keep Superman as Superman, and he was very, very passionate, patterning the verisimilitude word. In other words, everything must be believable. So it wasn't important that an alien with superpowers is in our world, but it must feel like he's really flying, that we believe what's going on the screen. So let's be factual here. James Gunn does not like Superman and never wanted to direct Superman Legacy, but Peter Safran pressured him into directing Superman Legacy. So how is that going to work out? I would assume not very well. So let's go back to our history lesson. So the people who fired Zack Snyder brought in James Gunn to write and direct a Suicide Squad movie. But was the plan to make him the new president of DC Films, the co-CEO of DC Studios, as Zaslav puts it? Was it a plan when he was brought in to write and direct Suicide Squad? He says no. I believe he is lying. But that wouldn't be anything new for James Gunn. So it looks like the people that did what they did to Zack Snyder used his daughter's suicide against him to get him out of the company and stop him finishing his Justice League movie. They're the people who brought in James Gunn. So I want to be clear with you. The people who kiboshed the Snyderverse and told you the Snyder Cut didn't exist are the side that James Gunn's on. The people who did this to Snyder are still there. Let's be very, very clear about that. There is no denying that. You can say what you want about me. I really don't care because I'm done taking this on the chin. So, as I say, the Flash movie was a film built on toxicity. But how, Mike? I want you to imagine all these people in a room finding a way to move away from Snyder. What should we do? How can we get away from this man's movie? What can we do? Let's make a Flash movie. The Flash has the Speed Force. He can rewrite and reboot the timeline and give us a brand new timeline. But that Cavill guy, we've got to get rid of that Cavill guy. He wants to make a great Superman movie. We can't be having that. He's got too many opinions. How do we get rid of him? We swap him for Supergirl. Great idea. We swap Batfleck for Batgirl. We'll bring in Michael Keaton. Yeah, we're bringing Michael Keaton. He'll bring all the nostalgia bucks, won't he? It turns out that has been their most exposing decision yet, because Michael Keaton has brought nobody to cinemas. Or maybe, if it wasn't for Michael Keaton, the flop would be even worse. Surely it couldn't be even worse than it already is. So they're sitting here in a room trying to plan how to destroy Snyder's vision, how to move away from Snyder's vision, and the Flash movie was the perfect plan. We can sell this as nostalgia bait. We can tell them we're going to make everything that's ever lived in DC live action canon. And their real plan, the DCU. They swapped a great universe for that barrel of shit. But as they were making these plans, of course, and they made a Batgirl movie, which was really a Batman Beyond movie using Batgirl instead of the original male character from the Batman Beyond story, because that's the only Batman Beyond thing they were ever planning. The other stuff, that if the Flash movie was successful, they were going to make a Batman Beyond movie with Michael Keaton, is bullshit. The Batman Beyond movie with Michael Keaton is Batgirl, with Leslie Grace, where he's barely in it for 20 minutes. That's the movie they're talking about. So in the end, their plan was kiboshed because David Zaslav was brought in to be an asset stripper. That's what Zaslav is, an asset stripper. We didn't see that coming. We didn't realize the fiscal mess WB were in. Even at the end of the, Time Warner acquisition, when they sold it to AT&T, the company was already in a mess. That's why AT&T were having so many redundancies. And obviously the redundancies have become even worse since Zaslav's taken over. Now we're seeing Zaslav for what he really is, because the TCM channel, what's going on this week, has been utterly revealing. What's interesting with the $500 million deal with Sony to sell soundtracks and music from WB properties and films seems to be happening, all this seems to be happening right after The Flash has bombed. It looks like they really needed the Flash movie to be successful. It sounds like this was their last chance. So they attempted to build a movie on toxicity. I've said it before, they wanted to push everything under the bed and move on. Keep what they wanted to and move on. That was the so-called Hamada plan. Interestingly, everyone keeps on telling me about the wonderful James Gunn plan. It's exactly the same as the Walter Hamada plan. It is. It's the same thing. Soft reboot, get rid of Cavill, get rid of Batfleck. I mean, I don't know exactly what Hamada was planning because he had that post-credit scene in the Flash movie with Batfleck asking Barry to come find him. So I don't know if they were planning to use Batfleck in that Flash sequel or if it was just going to be a waste of time journey with Barry looking for him in the sequel and not finding him. I have no idea. So the Flash movie is built on utter toxicity, and all it wanted to do was move away from the Snyderverse. Now, the planning of the Flash movie was right in the middle of the fight to release the Snyder Cut. This was very, very interesting. This came at a very, very, very interesting time because they were in a mess because the fans had exposed them. Snyder had exposed them via his fans. There was a civil war going on between Snyderverse fans, Snyder, and WB at the time. And, you know, they were in an almighty mess and they really didn't know what to do next. So the Flash movie was the way for them to finally kick Snyder into touch, kick Cavill into touch. But then a very interesting thing happened. They announced that Ben Affleck would return as Batman. I was as shocked as you were, and it sounded exciting. But they were planning to bring back Batfleck, but not Cavill. So already it was a very disjointed situation. Now the announcement of the Flash movie got me excited. These kind of announcements got me excited. I thought we were going to have this great shared Flashpoint movie. I thought we were going to see, you know, the Amazonians versus Atlantis and all of that. But once I realized what they were planning slowly and slowly, old Mickey Boy, who's got quite a high IQ, by the way, even if I do say so myself, started to put it all together. Because I put it together a long, long time ago. Because here on my channel, I was telling you what was going on. They built something on toxicity. And you know what? Karma is a bitch. Because then to bite them on the backside was the Ezra Miller situation. All of a sudden, Ezra was acting, I think, out of character. The violence, the accusations, the federal offences, everything he was being accused of and being charged for. This was very, very sudden. This person had a meltdown. So let me put you in the mind of Ezra Miller, because lots of people hate Ezra Miller. They've got, the same old opinions about Ezra Miller, but I want to put you in the mind of this young man. You're a Flash fan. You're getting to play the character you've always looked up to. The lad went on an interview and promised the fans that they were going to make sure this movie was special. I believe, warts and all their flaws and all of that, Ezra Miller really wanted to deliver you a great Flash movie. I genuinely believe that. It doesn't mean I approve of their conduct or anything like that, but I believe the lad was genuine. But this lad was surrounded by people who didn't want to give you a great Flash movie. Their only motivation was to destabilize the Snyderverse and Henry Cavill. And this person is going absolutely insane because this thing's his whole life. He's fighting. They're fighting. They're looking left. They're looking right. They're trying to find a way to deliver a great movie. And everyone around them doesn't want to deliver a great movie. Basically, they have pushed, and I'm talking about Ezra Miller, they have pushed to remove this director, that director, because they weren't going to make a great Flash movie either. At least two directors, I think, Ezra helped push out. And I think they were the two directors that were the ones just before things started to change that were removed. And I'm not talking about the Lego Movie boys or the Spider-Verse guys, right? I'm talking about the ones who did Lights Out. I think they're the ones Miller removed. So then, in a last-ditch attempt by Miller to come up with a great movie, they found an iconic comic book writer to go off and write a pitch with. But WB declined the pitch. That was the last straw for Ezra. And I think this is when Ezra broke as a person. I think that's when they couldn't take any more. But the Ezra Miller situation bit them on the arse. And that was the last kind of straw for any chance of a successful Flash movie. They had built everything on this movie. Everything relied on this movie being successful. I said it 2 or 3 years ago. This movie had to be successful or their future plans wasn't going to work. I said it in terms of the Walter Hamada plan, not necessarily the James Gunn plan. But this movie being exposed, this movie failing, has also exposed James Gunn, because this movie has got James Gunn's fingerprints all over it. Because we really don't know how long James Gunn has been involved with DC. And the very enemies of Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill, who have been plotting to dismantle them for years, who greenlit Justice League. That's the side of the fence James Gunn is on. Make no mistake about that. So Ezra Miller broke because the Flash movie meant everything to them. Right now, Ezra Miller can't be a happy bunny. This person tried everything to give us a great movie, and it didn't work out. He fought them. They fought them, and it didn't work. And now their reputation is in tatters because, make no mistake, this industry will break the most nicest, light-hearted, fun person with any good heart. It's an impossible industry to stay vibrant in and good in because it's surrounded by bad people who are only interested in money, not entertainment. They don't care anymore what they put on the screen for you. But it's a very interesting situation now, because when Shazam! Fury of the Gods flopped, these people tried to throw The Rock under the bus. Zachary Levi saying he thwarted us at every angle. He didn't say he, but we know exactly who he was talking about. That brings me to the Black Adam plan and the plan from Adby and DeLuca to bring back Cavill. I was again rewatching Black Adam last night. It's interesting, when I first went to the early screening of Black Adam, I thought, it was exciting, it was cool, it looked great, it was all right. But the more I see it since I've seen the Flash movie, the more I like it. And now I'm finding myself needing to apologize to The Rock, because now I see it as a great piece of popcorn cinema. The music, the action, the VFX, but it's not just that. People say that this guy had too much ego to cross over with Levi's Shazam. Let me ask you this question. If The Rock had so much ego, why is he standing there with Pierce Brosnan on screen? Why is he standing there with a 6-foot Aldis Hodge on screen? That's not a man of ego. That's a man trying to create and produce the best thing he possibly can. He brought the best composer to do it. One of the best composers in Hollywood. And that score is beautiful. It hits beautifully. Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate. That's a great version of Dr. Fate. Ask any comic book fan. I saw it on Twitter. Wow, Dr. Fate's amazing. These are die-hard JSA fans. Hawkman. Think about it. Can you remember anyone making a fuss because Hawkman was being played by a black man? No, because the black man in question, Aldis Hodge, delivered a wonderful performance. He was perfect as Hawkman. And I think very few white guys would have done a better performance. And that's another thing about Black Adam. If you like great representation inclusion, in other words, people who get their jobs maybe because they're black or brown, but actually are talented, and wow, the casting in this movie is perfect inclusion and representation. Great Muslim actors. Sarah Shahi, what a brilliant performance. I mean, I've loved Sarah in Person of Interest and other stuff. She's always been great. She was brilliant. The kids who played Black Adam's son at the beginning, then the kid who plays the present day character, wonderful little actors, brought joy to me. The same joy as I got from Lily Aspell's young Diana performance in the opening sequence of the first Wonder Woman film, and that's when I knew I was going to love the shit out of that film. Pierce Brosnan, Aldis Hodge, Quintessa Swindell, Noah Centineo. This was a great cast. This was a movie done right. This man's not trying to give you Shakespeare. He's not trying to give you The Dark Knight. I told you that on my non-spoiler review here on my platform. But it was a very enjoyable piece of popcorn cinema. I think I've watched it 2 or 3 times this week. It's a great palate cleanser to the Flash movie. That's how you make a CBM. And The Rock wanted to run DC. Make no mistake about that. He wanted to at least run a section of DC. And the way he put that movie together, the way he put that production together, and let's give the director some kudos here. The guy who directed Black Adam, which was brought on by The Rock because he'd worked with The Rock before, did an excellent job. And let me say this, the director of Black Adam did a much better job than Andy Muschietti, or however you say his name, Andy Muschietti on The Flash. Let me repeat myself. The director of Black Adam did a better job than Andy Muschietti did on The Flash. Why? Well, it's very difficult to criticize Andy Muschietti as a director here. Don't forget, Andy Muschietti was making a studio movie. Black Adam was being made and led by The Rock. So basically, the motivation when they're making Black Adam was to make the greatest piece of DC media they can. And they did. They made the best film in their ability. Now the reviews are not very kind, because normally with films like that try to please the fans and be entertaining, isn't deemed on really good. But what's very interesting about the reviews of Black Adam, I've seen them give, fresh scores on Rotten Tomatoes for more inferior Marvel stock because they're corrupt. But why weren't they virtue signaling about the representation and inclusion, the beautiful representation and inclusion in Black Adam? I'll tell you a little secret, because The Rock's a Republican. He's a right-winger. It's all about politics, everyone. Now, I'm not a right-winger, to be clear, but that's why they were quite happy to destabilize this man's movie. But considering the video is called The Flash Movie Was Built on Toxicity, the same toxicity that built that movie, basically as soon as this movie flopped or didn't make the money it needed to make, they were quite happy to throw The Rock under the bus. But here's some more evidence for you. When Shazam! Fury of the Gods failed, they tried to protect that movie. Nobody ain't protecting The Rock after Black Adam's opening box office weekends came through. But as I say, karma is a bitch, and The Rock got his karma because his movie is more successful than The Flash and Shazam! Fury of the Gods. They weren't interested in giving you a great movie, but The Rock was. And as I say, this is evidence. If he did run a portion of DC, or DC entirely, he would have done a great job. The Black Adam movie proves that right now, they should be running to him and say, fucking hell, mate, please, whatever you did with Black Adam, do it for an entire universe. And then there's that Cavill post-credit scene. As I say, I've seen the movie 2 or 3 times, and every time I see that scene, it looks better and better. I don't care about the discourse about John Williams' Superman theme, which actually was done brilliantly by Lorne Balfe, a darker tone version. Whether you think that's right or wrong, that post-credit scene pops. And it really excites you for the future. What doesn't excite you for the future is a fucking George Clooney post-credit scene put there for laughs. You were made a lot of promises with the Flash movie. Best movie since The Dark Knight. It was going to make everyone in live action canon. And it was going to reset the universe and give you a brand new timeline. Where is it? Where's the new timeline? That's why, that's right, because there's no new timeline, because James Gunn's not ready to show you anything yet. So how can they show you a new timeline? I told you on one of my lives what I would have done originally when Hamada was planning this shit. But of course they can't use Ezra Miller anymore, so that wouldn't work. My plan would have been, he reboots the universe, he comes to this new timeline, he finds and discovers the Hall of Justice. He's walking all around and he sees like all these different levels. He's seeing all these different superheroes. He looks up and sees the Watchtower. Then the movie finishes. I'm telling you, not only the general audience, but DC stans and, nerds in general would have loved that ending. But they're not here to excite you or give you what you want. They're here to do the bare minimum. So, to no surprise to me or anyone else with half a brain, The Flash failed. Of course it did. And they deserve it to fail. I keep on hearing, how dare people be happy about this movie's failure? Are you kidding me? You're the same people that keep on telling me you're glad the Snyderverse won't continue. Basically, you're doing your best to protect this toxicity, but it doesn't matter. Because the box office doesn't lie. The box office basically tells you the audience didn't want this. Even if it's a movie that I like, right? I'm honest enough to say when people don't go and watch a movie, it tells you something, right? But also, it depends what you're looking for from box office. Now, obviously, the Flash movie isn't a debatable flop, right? It's an official flop. When people call BVS a flop, it's not. Basically, it's a debatable flop because the movie nearly made 900 million. That's an amazing piece of box office. It's not what the studio wanted. I agree. It should have made more money. A film with bats and soups in should be making more money. I agree with that. I'm not denying that. But there's a difference between a debatable flop and an actual flop. Man of Steel is a debatable flop. Is 650 million for a Superman movie great? No. Is it a flop? No. Because it made money. Should have made more, but they could have built on the stuff they built in the movie. And they could have slowly had a successful franchise. But they were reactive. And their reaction led them to the Flash movie. Because when a movie is only interested in destabilization and toxicity, you have a problem. Did you really think you could mess with the most popular Superman since Christopher Reeve and get away with it? Because I've heard a lot of people give their contrived reasons why the Flash movie failed, but not one of them are saying it's because they basically swapped let me say this clearly. They swapped one of the best Supermen since Christopher Reeve for Sasha Calle, an unknown actress, as Supergirl. That's what they did. They swapped Supergirl for Superman, and they didn't think there'd be any consequences. They didn't think James Gunn saying, well before this movie's released, that Henry Cavill won't be going forward, after Adby and DeLuca had announced that he was coming back after that Black Adam post-credit scene. Did you think there will be no consequences? This is your consequences, Mr. Emmerich, Mr. Hamada, Mr. Gunn. These are your consequences. Because this is what I'm talking about. A clever bloke doesn't announce that Henry Cavill won't be his Superman before these movies finish. Why did he do that? And he actually thought he was going to get away with it. If you're looking for a reason why The Flash really failed, and there's so many reasons I can give you, I've just literally labelled them all in the past half hour. But the firing of Henry Cavill is the reason the Flash movie failed.